Welcome to the podcast. Now that I'm engaged, how do I get married? I'm your host, Kevin Dennis.
And I'm August Joker, co-host and brand manager at Fantasy Sound Event Services.
In addition to leading the charge at Wedding IQ, I also run Fantasy Sound Event Services, a lighting and entertainment company based in Livermore, California, that I founded over 35 years ago.
Each week on this podcast, we'll explore a new corner of wedding planning so you can prepare for your I-dos without the stress.
From budgeting to booking vendors to the day of drama.
Let's talk smart wedding planning.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How Do I Get Married? And we're here with Jaime Coast today, stationery designer, and she's going to be talking about insider tips for mailing your invitations with confidence. And I'm like really excited to get into this because I feel like that's such a stress for folks to mail their stuff out. So Jaime, tell us a little about yourself and how we got you here today.
Absolutely. So, Kevin and August, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here and talking to everyone engaged and planning their weddings. So, Cotton and Bow is the name of my stationery company. We are based in Westchester, New York, and we specialize in watercolor wedding invitations, as well as save the dates and any other paper goods that you would need for your weddings and events. We like to say that we illustrate love stories. That's, really our focus is, taking those, different love stories and personalities and, capturing different destinations and figuring out how to tell those love stories in interesting ways for all of your guests.
I love it. And now I'm going to have to dive in and check out all your stuff because I love watercolor stuff. It's really awesome. So, all right. So mailing wedding invitations feels stressful for a lot of couples. Why is this step so intimidating?
Yes, so I think there's a couple of components. One is just the timing of it. People are always confused. There's a lot of conflicting advice on the internet and from, etiquette guidebooks. And then the second step of it is just, the black box of the post office. Once you kind of drop things off, you don't know where things are. And so, there is a little bit of that mystery of, do the invites actually make it to their destination? And, how much is postage going to cost? So, we can kind of talk about all three of those things. If we want to start with timing, I think, timing, especially, right now, everybody's getting ready to send out their invites over the next couple of months. It used to be that 6 to 8 weeks was sort of your traditional guidance of, 6 to 8 weeks before the wedding, you should send out your invites. And now, especially post-COVID, we're getting earlier and earlier. So I know me and a lot of the other stationery designers as an industry, we are now recommending that you send out your invitations, 2 to 3 months in advance. For sure, 3 months has kind of become the new standard, that 10 to 12 weeks instead of the 6 to 8. And that's just to give the post office a little bit more time to deliver those invitations, especially with recent staffing shortages and budget cuts. Things do take a little bit longer to get there. But it's also to give couples a little bit more peace of mind and time in order to get RSVPs in, follow up on RSVPs that haven't come in yet, and do all of the great day of pieces like menus and place cards and seating charts and really get creative with those pieces if they want to, because couples are so much more into the experience of the day now. And so having a longer lead time between getting the RSVPs in and the actual day is critical for that. And so what you don't want to do is be stressed 2 weeks before the wedding, still working on your seating chart. So having a little bit of a longer lead time there really helps. And then for destination weddings, we're even recommending like 4 to 5 months in advance to really give people more time for travel.
Yeah.
Well, that just makes sense in general. Why do you think it, like, the standard was always 6 to 8 weeks? Because it kind of just makes more sense, like you said, the peace of mind and, you've spent a lot on invitations and also getting them back and being able to kind of filter through all that information. Like, I feel like the 10 to 12 weeks kind of makes more sense across the board.
It definitely does nowadays, especially when you think about the overall timeline of, you're probably planning your wedding 12 to 18 months out. That's, how far in advance venues are booking. 10, 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
There was just a much shorter lead time of planning the wedding overall. And so if you are planning a wedding on like a 6-month timeline, let's say, or even a 3-month timeline, then you can see how maybe a 6 to 8 week
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
piece was more common back then, because it was sort of like you'd get engaged, if you're having like a backyard or courthouse or, like local venue type wedding, and it was much smaller. We're talking about in the 80s and, earlier, those weddings are being planned like a lot sooner. Like I'm just thinking of my own parents and, how they kind of
Yeah.
planned their wedding. They were sort of just, going into a stationery store, picking out, from 10 identical looking invitations that basically just had like, it was white or it was ecru. And, they had
Yeah.
a couple of different fonts that they could choose from.
And some ribbon.
Navy or black. Yes, exactly. Different color ribbon. And so, in that case, I think the 6 to 8 weeks was just from a practical standpoint, like that's
Yeah.
when those things were kind of happening.
So if we're working off that, 3-month timeline, then when should couples actually start thinking about even starting the process for invitations so they can hit that mark?
Absolutely. And that is something that I think couples are often surprised about, is just how long those things can take, especially in our Amazon world where everything ships in 2 days.
And shows up at 4 and 8 o'clock in the morning. That's the new
Same
thing.
day delivery.
Yeah.
Same day delivery, exactly. Yes, and I think it depends on the type of invitation you're ordering.
Okay.
So, I'll start with, the fastest you can really get invitations is about 1 to 2 weeks. And that's if you're ordering, direct from a site like Minted or Zazzle, where, everything is sort of already pre-designed, pre-baked, and you're just entering your information, entering in your addresses, and like everything's just being printed and sent to you right away. Even that takes, 1 to 2 weeks. And so I think
Okay.
people are really
Yeah.
surprised by that timeline of, they think, okay, I can, print off my invites and have them by the end of the week. And that might even just take them 2 weeks, because it would take the printer and the company themselves maybe 5 business days to actually make the invitations.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's going to take shipping another, 5 days if you're using just like standard economic round shipping, like whatever the free shipping option that comes with it. So people are often surprised by that. I think then if you're going into like working with more of a stationer, or you want to incorporate artwork, and you're going into like more of a semi-custom realm, you're looking at more of a 4 to 6 week timeline. And again, that's like your concept there is already sort of like pre-designed. You're picking out, a layout, or, you're picking out things, but you're actually working with a person to customize certain elements of the
Yeah.
design. And then if you're going, fully bespoke, fully custom, you're really starting from scratch. You don't have a concept. You're, working one-on-one with a designer to design something that's totally tailored to your wedding and your personalities. That is going to take anywhere from, 8 to 12 weeks, maybe even
Mm.
Yeah.
longer. You might want to book further in advance if the stationer is really popular and has a limited number of availability spots. Some stationers will book out, a year in advance, even if they're
Oh,
very
wow.
popular.
That makes sense, especially for
Yeah.
really custom stuff.
Yeah, there are
Yeah.
some stationers who, are just very limited. They only take on 10 clients a year, like kind of
Yeah.
deal. And so in
Mm.
those cases, someone who's just like a very highly skilled artisan, like craftsman kind of stationer, they
Mhm.
might, the type that you would maybe see on Instagram, who's very popular on Instagram, who's, getting featured in, Over the Moon and things like that for their artistry. Those
Yeah.
sorts of people are getting booked up a year in advance, just simply because they have limited availability.
Yeah, makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Well, and not to get off base with like the mailing topic for today, but I'm kind of curious like when a couple books you, and cuz I mean, I don't think we've had I think we maybe had one other stationer on the podcast before, but it's been a minute. But I'm assuming there's like a lot of personality involved. Like, do you send them just the prints, or do they get the actual watercolor too, or how does that work as far as the invitations go?
Yes, because so much of my stuff is based on original watercolor, I do actually send the original over as
Oh, that's
well.
Oh,
nice. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think it adds just such a key level of permanence to the entire process.
Hmm.
When you are working one-on-one with a stationery designer who is an artist first, what you're really doing is you're commissioning a custom piece of art, right?
Yeah.
So if
Hmm.
you were to commission a piece of artwork for your home, and then you're kind of getting the invitations as a bonus on top of that. So I do send out that original artwork to frame or to tuck inside your wedding album. And that's a really nice keepsake after that. And I know a lot of other stationery designers do the same if they are artists themselves. Some stationery designers are not artists. They're more of like a graphic designer
Oh,
or like a letterpress printmaker. So it just kind of depends on
what type?
what what look you're going for, and who you're kind of working with.
So, Jamie, are there any mistakes that couples make when preparing their invitations to be mailed?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that can get you into trouble with the post office. There's
Oh,
also just things that can cause the mailing to be more expensive that people don't realize. And so that's not
oh,
necessarily like a mistake that's going to get you flagged, but it might be something that just costs you more money than you realize and might have implications in terms of your budget. Biggest mistakes I see. The first one is putting a wax seal on the outside of your envelope. Wax seals are still very popular. People really love that look of, the sort of hand dripped like wax or the
yeah,
seal. If you watched the Taylor Swift
Yeah,
documentary,
I was
she
just gonna
yes,
bring that up. I
yes,
was just gonna
she
bring
did
that
that
up.
for her bonuses.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm sure we'll see a lot more people getting back into that, and we'll see a huge resurgence of wax seals. But it's been very popular still. I still do a lot of those. And so, we usually recommend putting them on an inner envelope or putting them inside of the invitation in some way, either on, a gatefold or to attach to a ribbon or to attach to, a vellum like wrap or a belly band like over the invitation, as opposed to putting them on like the outside of the envelope that's getting mailed physically,
Yeah.
like you would have seen kind of in like a Bridgerton era.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Um,
probably back then.
yeah, and so the reason for that is, I mean, historically, the reason why they put it on the reason why they used wax seals to begin with was because one, it was almost like a signature. Like
Mm,
every
Yeah.
family household had their own stamp, and so they would seal things with wax. And by the time it was delivered to the person, you could then tell if your mail was tampered with because if the wax seal had been
oh,
broken, then you knew that somebody had opened your envelope and nobody else had your seal. And so you couldn't really open it and then reseal it
Mm.
because it had your sort of family crest like seal
yeah,
on it. And so we're going back to like 1700s, 1800s.
I
Like
love
that's why
this
they
though.
started
yeah. That's
using
cool history,
wax
though.
seals to begin with.
Yeah.
And letters were hand delivered, right? And so by horseback. So the reason for the envelope was to keep the inside clean because it was
Hmm.
very dirty to actually deliver these things. By the time they got to the recipients, the outside was extremely dirty, and so you would actually have both an outer envelope and an inner envelope. And so that's how we get to today with traditional wedding invitations. You'll have that outer envelope, and then you'll even have an inner envelope that'll have the different names of the family who's invited, addressed by name individually. That dates back to that, sort of 1700, 1800 tradition of the outer envelope just getting so dirty from being
Hmm.
hand delivered on horseback on dirt roads. So I mean, going back to why we don't recommend mailing them that way anymore is because we're not really doing hand delivery by horseback. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of the mail is being sorted now by machines, and so
Oh,
if you put that wax seal on the outside of the envelope, what's going to happen is when it goes through the machine to get sorted, that's going to tear right off, and so it might damage your envelope, might damage the wax seal. It might not arrive with the wax seal on it at all. Even if you pay for it to be hand canceled or you request for it to be hand canceled, that is something that we recommend with all wedding invitations is that you actually take them to the counter at the post office and you ask them to be hand canceled. Even if you do that, they will still be sorted by a machine, most likely at some
mm.
point. If they fit through a machine, a post office worker is going to put them through a machine.
And does hand canceled mean like it's just handled by a person throughout the
Instead of the
process, or what
machine.
Yes.
does that mean
What
exactly?
it's Yes, it's a little bit of a misnomer. What it's supposed to mean is that it's hand sorted
Hmm.
and hand stamped, right? So canceled literally means like the stamp on the envelope
Oh, yeah, it
is
gets
actually striked out or
mhm.
I
stamped
see.
by a hand instead of by the machine. What that doesn't mean, though, is that at the next destination it gets to, it won't be sorted by machine. And as
Mm.
we know, post office, they have to deal with hundreds of thousands of envelopes every day. And they have to get through their entire day's worth of mail by 5 p.m., right? By 6 p.m., like whatever the cutoff date is. And so they're putting everything that they can through the machine. So it might be hand canceled at the first destination. At the second post office it gets to, it's going to be sorted by a machine no matter what. As long
Mm.
as it fits through that slot, it's going to be
And
sorted that way.
goes through. So, all right. Well, so speaking
Yeah.
of post office, how does weight, layers, and embellishments affect postage, and how can couples avoid surprises at the post office?
Yes, definitely. So the wax seal definitely adds weight and it adds
Mhm.
lumpiness. So that is something that can add more postage to your envelope overall. The other thing is having a square or like other oddly shaped envelope
Oh,
can
okay.
do
Oh,
it.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
Yes, that will cause it to be more expensive. You can't just use one forever stamp. As soon as you make it a square, it becomes an irregular shape. And so that adds cost. Um,
Wow.
Even just turning the envelope, vertically and writing the address vertical,
Oh.
is a big no-no at the post office, and so they will charge you extra for that, or they might even ask you to redo it, because it just
Wow.
doesn't get sorted through the machine then, in the correct way, and so it makes it more difficult for them to mail it.
Oh my gosh, can you
Mm.
imagine doing like
Mhm.
300 invitations one way and having to restart? Like, oh my goodness.
Yes, yes, so that's a big one. Um, Anything that makes it, like, too thick, so, people really love, like, double thick paper sometimes, and I usually recommend, that's great for the main invitation, but not to do that if you have for all of the pieces, if you have a details card and an RSVP card and maybe even a
Mhm.
3rd card, like, not to make them all double thick or triple thick paper, unless you plan to mail them as a package, because what ends up happening is if it gets too thick, it won't fit through the mail slot, and so they won't
Mm.
count it as a letter anymore, they're gonna count it as a package, and so then you're bumped up to ground shipping, you can't put stamps on it anymore, and they want you to pay at least, $4 to ship that then with a tracking
Oh,
label.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you're talking about, then 4 times as expensive
Mhm.
just because you made it a little bit too thick.
Wow.
And our
So
next question kind of like leads into that, but I was gonna ask first, like I was kind of we were preparing for the episode and I saw the word like invitation suite. Is that a
Mhm.
word that you use? Okay, I didn't realize
Yes,
what it meant, but essentially like all of those little fancy papers together all in one.
exactly. Suite is just a fancy word for set.
Set, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
of all the things together, but have you ever had a couple kind of test one out beforehand? Should they take the full, like, set, the suite to the post office prior just to see if there's any issues or anything like that?
Yes, definitely. So, if you're not working with a designer, that's something I would highly recommend is you take the suite to the post office to the counter, ask them to weigh it for you, and tell you how much the postage is going to be. That will give you a pretty good idea of what the postage is going to be when you go to do the whole mailing, and to make sure that there's nothing funky about your envelopes, in terms of lumpiness or thickness or anything like that that's going to cause
Mm.
them to be undeliverable. um, and then if you're working with a stationer, usually they have a pretty good idea of like what's mailable, so it's not usually as
Mhm,
necessary to take them to a post office. Your stationer probably should be doing that for you in some capacity, or is mailing out thousands of envelopes a month, and so they usually have a pretty good idea and standard of a 3-piece suite.
mhm.
In a 5 by 7 envelope, like we know what that's going to cost.
Mm. Love it. All right. So, are there some best practices to addressing the envelopes so they arrive like clean, legible, and undamaged?
Well, what's funny is people get really particular about the addressing component of it, but that's actually the least
Oh, really?
likely thing to sort of like mess anything up. If you think about
Oh.
it,
Okay.
well, people always ask like, oh, if the calligraphy font okay, or is like hand calligraphy okay if it's like not super legible, like is that going to mess anything up? I mean, the things that the post office cares about is the zip code most
Mhm.
importantly.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the zip code is legible, it's going to make it like to the destination pretty much. 99% of the time. They're sorting everything by the zip code until it gets to that local post office, and then it's, up to the local postman to kind of deliver
Okay.
it. And so, if a person can read it, it'll get to its destination. There are going to be exceptions to that, of course. Humans, there's human error in everything. So, I've had things, get returned to sender that should have been delivered to my home address, just
Mm.
because, whoever the post office worker that day was, misread it or missorted it or whatever. So those things do happen occasionally. There's about a 3 to 5% rate of delay or undeliverable in the mail overall. And so we see that on our end as well, just mailing out
Mm-hmm.
thousands of packages and envelopes each year. It's about 3 to 5%. Just
Oh, wow.
don't
That's
make
pretty
it to their
high.
destination.
Yeah.
And it is, but if you think about just the fact that like you have humans, handling the
Yeah.
mail, and things, fall out of a bag and are in somebody's truck, and like that,
Yeah.
it's getting passed from person to person to person to person.
Yeah, it makes
Um,
sense when you say it
yeah.
that way.
And so, people only really run into this when it comes to wedding invitations and then holiday cards. That's like your biggest, like you're going to be mailing out 100 envelopes at a time or 50 envelopes at a time. And that's when people really start to notice it.
Mhm.
And so when you think about that, it's like, okay, out of 100 envelopes, 3 of them are going to be delayed or might go
Mhm.
missing. Um, and so from that perspective, you're going to have just, a handful of your mailing end up needing to be remailed, um, or end up needing to be, like called individually and told that they're invited to the wedding.
Yeah.
You're invited. Beef
Yeah,
or
and I guess
fish?
like that's hard because like how do you write? I mean, can you get like tracking on the individual envelopes? Like, how would a couple even know if like that 3 to 5% didn't make it to
They don't
its
RSVP.
destination? I mean, yeah, but some people just don't RSVP because they did it, right? So I don't know. Like, I guess that's hard, but or I guess if it was someone close enough to you, they would see other people start getting their invitations and wonder where theirs is too.
Exactly. I think practically that's exactly what happens is, you have
Mhm.
people not RSVP and you call them up and they're like, well, I never got an invite. Um,
Yeah.
what we recommend to our custom invitation clients these days is that they do send out their invitations via ground, which is just a tracking label. It's still USPS, but we put it in like a rigid mailer. We just, we do the same process. Everything's, in an addressed envelope. We just take that envelope, we put it in a rigid mailer, and then we put a tracking label on top of it and mail it through the post office that way. So that way you do have all the tracking labels. You can see which ones make it. If any are missing, then you can follow up and send out an additional one, or see if you have the address wrong, something like
And obviously that adds to the cost of postage, I'm assuming.
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Correct. And the way we look at it is if you're spending, thousands of dollars on your invitations, spending, a couple hundred extra to make sure that those invitations make it to their
Oh.
destination, makes sense. I think if you're spending only a couple $100s on your invitations, or less than $100 on your invitations, then having to mail out 3 to 5 extra ones because they didn't make it, that then makes more sense. And
Yeah.
so then we would recommend doing your stamps that way instead.
Mm. Just like having insurance, I'm assuming. It just makes it
Yeah.
safer and better way to get it there. So
Exactly. It's like, you insure your headphones, your really expensive jewelry, your MacBook, but you're not going to insure your socks, right? Because
Yeah.
if your socks get a hole in it, you just get new socks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
What
Um,
can you tell couples about like international invitations and mailing stuff overseas?
yeah, so that's another place where we do recommend using like UPS instead of USPS and using
Hmm.
tracking. Because
Yeah.
even the USPS international mail can take, a couple of weeks to get there.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
so we typically recommend sending that through UPS if it's not too expensive. And then, following up with those folks in terms of RSVPs. If you were doing, a traditional mailback RSVP, which is where you actually send out a card and an envelope and ask people to mail back the RSVP card to you in order to RSVP, you might want to follow up with those folks internationally because the stamp is obviously not going to work to send it back.
Yeah. Is that still
Um,
pretty common? People doing like the physical mail back?
Yeah, so I have about 50-50 these days of people
Really?
still
Okay.
doing the mailback. So I would say it's just as common to do online RSVP these days as it is to do
Okay.
mailback. The pros and cons that I usually discuss with couples are the pro of doing the mailback RSVP is really just the sentiment of it. If you've
Mhm.
always wanted to do it and you always wanted to have that tradition and that moment of getting the RSVP envelopes back in the mail, you want the formality of it, you want the tradition, and you want that experience. This is the only time in your life that you're going to really be able to do it. This is the
Yeah.
most formal party that
Yeah.
most couples are throwing in their entire lives. And so, this is your chance to do it. You might as well go for it. Otherwise, in terms of tracking RSVPs, it's much easier and faster to do it with an online RSVP. You can still have a card. You can have a QR code if you want to make it really simple for people to scan. And all you really need is your wedding website and direct people to your wedding website through a QR
Mm.
code or through the URL, and then have people go there and RSVP that way. That makes it a lot easier for you to track. You don't have to keep a separate spreadsheet and kind of track things as they come
Yeah.
back to you. It's all being tracked automatically as people fill it out. It's also a lot faster because you're not waiting on the mail to go back and forth in two
Right.
directions. It's as soon as it gets to the recipient can log on and do that, and it's instantaneous that you have it back. And then, the only potential con is if you have some older guests who aren't as computer
Mm.
savvy. You,
Yeah.
yeah, you can always have, some younger designated people, right? Like your cousin can be in charge of helping your grandma log on and, and do the RSVP.
Yeah.
Or those folks can always call you and RSVP, over the phone and you can help them out in that way.
Yeah.
I've also had people do both. I've had people
I was
do
gonna say, yeah.
mailback RSVPs for kind of the VIP guests, or guests who are a little bit less computer savvy, and then the bulk of the mailing do online RSVPs for the rest of the guests.
That's probably a safer way to go, and then that way, yeah, makes it easier for everyone.
Definitely.
So, you mentioned earlier the 5 by 7 envelope. So are there invitation styles, design choices that are more friendlier than others?
Generally, in order to classify as first class letter, you have to be under a certain size. And so you want to kind of be like A9 or below, which A9 is 6 by 8.
Mhm.
But you can get pretty large before it starts to classify as a package.
Mm.
Um, but A7, which is a 5 by 7 inch invitation, is kind of the standard. um, an A9 is considered like large.
Mm.
And then some people even go with like an A6 if they want to do like a petite, which is like more of like a 4 by 6
Mm.
invitation. So, there are some kind of ranges in there. Some people do a square, so you can do like a 6 by 6 square in there as well. So there are, different styles that you can kind of fit within that.
Mhm. Love it.
And I feel like you touched on this a little bit, but I don't know if you had any more tips because I know you mentioned like not using thick paper, but are there like is there a way to kind of balance like a design that you're wanting with being practical about the way it's being mailed?
Yes, I mean, I think, there's so many things that you can do, and even if you do wanna go really crazy, and do things that are out of the box, use different materials, just because you're breaking the mold of what's considered a letter doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means
Mhm.
that you're gonna have to send it as a package, and so, like
Right.
we talked about
Right.
before, if you're already considering, custom invitations and sending them via ground just so you have that tracking, or maybe you just want the peace of mind of it, to have those tracking numbers be a part of it. Then you can really go nuts, right? You can send anything then,
Mm.
in terms of packages, right? As if it fits in a cardboard box, you can send it.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, people will send potatoes through the mail. Like you can put a bunch of stamps on it and send it.
I've
So,
sent a coconut once. Yeah.
you can like really get away with some crazy stuff. It's just, if you're sending out 100 at once and you're dependent on them getting there, you want to
Yeah.
maybe follow the rules a little bit more. The biggest mistake I see, as kind of a second thing to the wax seals that we were talking about earlier is along the lines of stamps.
Mm.
And
Mm.
people trying to save money when it comes to postage is they'll go and try and find like deals on stamps and they'll buy discounted stamps.
Oh.
And so that is also another place that people think they're getting some sort of deal. They'll go to Amazon and buy stamps from Amazon. And the truth is that most of the stamps on Amazon are counterfeit, and people don't realize
Oh
that.
my god.
I didn't
And
even know
yeah,
this was a thing.
yes, it's really hard to
Neither did I.
catch. It's really hard to catch, but it's really scary if it is caught by the post office that you're using counterfeit postage, because they just destroy the entire mailing. They just
Oh my
trash it.
god, no.
So they don't even tell you that they're doing it. Like they don't contact you, nothing. They just, if it's counterfeit, they just throw out the whole thing.
Oh my
So it's a
god.
That's
huge, huge thing that I tell clients if they're like, "Oh, I found these really cute stamps on Amazon. Like, can we use them?" I'm like, please don't
no.
risk it. Like it's such a huge thing.
I
And
mean, I
here,
don't
I
think
mean,
I've
here are the
ever bought
ways.
stamps other than at the post office before.
Yes, I always recommend going to the post office website directly. You can tell because it has a .gov at the end of it. If it
Yeah.
has,
Yeah.
like anything
Makes it
else.
more official.
Secure,
Yes, and
yeah.
you'd be surprised though, because there are a lot of official looking websites that have, URLs like usstamps.com and things like that you would think are the official government website, and they're not. And so you really want to make sure it's the official, .gov, like
Mm.
USPS, like website.
Mhm.
And then you can buy them there. You can buy them at your local post office, like at the counter. But a
Mhm.
lot of times they don't have the same selection that they have online. And so usually the online store has the most selection there.
Oh, so you can get the prettiest ones and all that.
Mhm.
You can also buy them from reputable vintage dealers. So if you love the look of vintage stamps or you just want some that are recently out of circulation, there are some reputable dealers that I recommend. Enfield Post is one.
Mm.
Um, Champion Stamps is another one. If you really like to dig and try and find different like vintage stamps, like they have a really great website to like, just kind of like dig through and find things. It feels a little bit more like thrift store shopping there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, Postage House Road is another one that I really love. She has a lot of great like vintage stamped options and curated sets that you can buy. And so from those sorts of dealers that those are really reputable.
Mm.
Some key like red flags to know if a stamp is probably counterfeit is if it's cheaper than the stamp sold on the USPS website.
Okay.
So
Oh.
if a forever stamp is sold for less than 78 cents, it is 100% counterfeit because there is no way for a stamp to be less than that amount right now, a forever stamp.
Gotcha.
It's
Right.
not like a product. Stamps are, basically legal tender of the post office, right? Like they are the
Yeah.
post
You're
office
paying.
money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's not like with a product where I can buy, cups wholesale, right? And then I'm selling them to customers, at double the cost because I'm trying to make a profit. Stamps are not like that, right? It's legal tender. And
Yeah.
so there is no way for you to discount money.
Yeah.
It'd be like if I
Yeah.
was selling you
No.
$1 for 75 cents, you'd be like, what's wrong with this dollar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anytime you see a stamp on sale or discounted or coupons for stamps, like those stamps are not real. They are 100% just stickers printed off in China, made to look like stamps.
That's so crazy.
Who knew there was counterfeit stamps? I'm learning something.
Do you
but-
guys know about that meme with Cynthia Erivo where she's like, I didn't know this was happening? That's how I feel about this. I didn't know this was happening. Learning
It's
today.
very common because they have
crazy.
so many cute stamps
Yeah.
on Amazon, and people think they're real, and I'm like, please don't buy them.
Please.
The white rose stamp is like the biggest one that
I see that
that
all the time. Yeah.
people love. The white rose stamp, or the ivory rose stamp, they sometimes call it. This stamp is so rare. Like if you see this stamp and it's not $7 a stamp, it is counterfeit, because the stamp has been basically bought out of existence by brides. And so this stamp, like the legitimate version of the stamp, is so rare because there's very few of them left. And so like at my reputable dealers, they're selling the stamp for $7 each, even though it's only worth
like
78
not
cents.
sheet, like per stamp.
No,
per
per
singular.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. So it's
I didn't know
very,
people
very
were taking
expensive.
stamps this seriously. That's crazy.
Yes, well,
Wow.
if you're like a stamp collector, like
That's true.
there are some stamps that are really rare. There are, you have a whole book of, all the different stamps. You might have all the
Right.
different state stamps. You might have
My
all the
uncle
floral
collected
stamps.
Yep. It was
Yes.
it was a
Cool.
big thing.
Yeah.
So, all right, Jamie, we're getting ready to wrap up. But so if you could give couples one insider tip to make mailing invitations stress for you, what would it be?
I would definitely say to take your invitations to the post office. Talk to the people behind the counter. The people are usually very knowledgeable there. They're very friendly and willing to help you. I know my local post office, everyone that works there, I know them on a first name basis because I'm in the post office twice a day.
That's cute.
And they're very friendly, and so willing to help you out. And so, that would be my biggest piece of advice. But don't be surprised if sometimes you get different advice from two different post office workers. So, I would say if you do get two different pieces of advice, one person says 2 stamps, another person says 1 stamp. It's always better to just go with more postage than less postage. So,
Yeah.
that would be my tip is, kind of err on the side of more postage, and to definitely, use the resources that you have in your local branch, instead of just, dropping them in some sort of blue box, and, hoping that they make it to their destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could see the post office workers getting excited because it's not the normal, not the normal things they're dealing with. They're dealing with something fun and cute and something
Exactly.
memorable. Yeah, I love
Exactly.
that.
They're always really happy when I come in with stacks and stacks of wedding invitations.
Yeah.
What are they for?
Jamie's
here.
I love it. All right. So, Jamie, where can couples find you and learn more about your stationery and invitation process?
Absolutely. So you can find me online at cottonandbow.com, or on Instagram at cottonandbowpaper.
All right. And we will be sure to have all of Jamie's information. And also, I think, August, we should put in all those, the vintage stamp folks
I
in
was
there
literally
as well.
thinking the same. Or like
Yeah,
the champion.com or the other one
Yeah.
you mentioned, like where to get reputable stamps other than the post office. I think I'll slide those in there too, because I think that's
Yeah.
really good information.
Yeah. Very
Yes,
good
if you
information.
actually comment on any of my Instagram posts, the word mailing, I have a mailing guide that I can send
Writing
you.
that down.
Yes, I'll DM it to you for free, and it goes through all of these great tips plus more. It goes through, how much different envelopes cost. Like if you have, just a plain invite versus an invite and a details card, or an invite and a details card and a RSP card, kind of how much you can expect that to cost. And it also talks about vintage stamps and some other good details in there.
Perfect.
Oh, yes,
All
we
right.
would love the guide. I think that would be great to put in the show notes. So,
I'm going to say we're going to
yeah.
put that in the show notes too, so you can get more information out there and help folks. So, all right, Jamie, I can't thank you enough. I'm impressed that we went 40 minutes talking about the post office, and I feel like we just scratched the surface, so to speak.
I loved
I feel
it.
like
It was great.
there was,
yeah.
more information we could have got out there. So, Jamie, we can't thank you for your time. We appreciate you being here today. And folks, thank you for listening to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How to Get Married. We'll see you next time. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Now That I'm Engaged, How Do I Get Married podcast.
Brought to you by Fantasy Sound Event Services.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Please get in touch with me or August if you have any topic you would like us to cover.
Or if you're struggling with your wedding planning, please be sure to submit a question to podcast@fantasysound.com.
I encourage you to check out our other episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're a fan, we'd love if you would subscribe to the podcast and leave a review.
It helps others find our podcast so that they can learn from our guests too. And to everybody listening,
Happy wedding planning!